going around the world. We are now fighting for that education, and this is linked to the SDG goal number 4, which is based on quality education.
Okay, so hi guys, thank you as well for joining. So in today's session, we have a myriad of topics that we will be talking about regarding education and sustainability and how those coincide together. As our table of contents, as you can see, is that firstly, we'll be talking about education and its importance. Next will be sustainability and education, intersectionality and education, the cost of attack on features. Then we'll be bringing in case studies. We won't just only be bringing 2 case studies, as you can see on the screen.
Are you in menu?
We'll be talking about DRC, Sudan, Ukraine, and Afghanistan. And then at the
Bring
end,
baby
we
stool.
do have a question for you all.
Hmm? Oh, okay.
Great. So, great. So we are talking about education. So I'm sure all of you know what an education is, as we also have been or went to an institution, a primary, a university, and nursery school as well. But just to get the theoretical framework of what an education is that education is a process of receiving or giving instruction in schools and university. And we see the importance of education in everyone's daily life is that education has benefited us greatly. Where education we can see in our lives and in our countries that education decreases poverty and ensures financial stability for all. Education increases opportunities and it establishes equality in society. It bridges the gap for everyone where we all have a space in society where equality is given to all, regardless of disability, gender, social status, or economic factors. Education as well creates a sense of dignity and confidence in all children. Education gives children a hope and also makes them to be able to be part of society and not taking them out from their own right that they do need to receive. Education as well. Lastly, it enhances creativity. As we've seen that with education doesn't necessarily have to be theoretical where we all studying to be doctors or engineers, but education provides options, a myriad amount of options where we can go into different sectors of, industries such as creativity, the arts, such as pardon, agriculture as well, which is also a form of education that kids are entitled to. I hope that has cleared everything for you guys.
Okay, so now just explaining this section, and I'm going to rewind back, right, Lindy? There are 17 SDG goals, and for those that don't really know, in 30 seconds in a nutshell, so the United Nations has developed 17 frameworks or goals that is all based on making life better and equality. And out of these 17 goals, so it's, for example, goal number 1 is this, goal number 2 is this. And our focus today is on goal number 4, which is quality education. And SDG in essence stands for Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I know there's always the question of what is sustainability? Do you get that question a lot, Lindy?
Definitely, yeah, definitely.
So, a very easy way to explain sustainability and for you to understand what it is. So, sustainability is, in essence, meeting today's needs without compromising the future of generations. So, in other words, it's us that are here today using the resources that we have, such as land, water, and energy, in a very, very wise way, so that in the next 50, 100, 200 years from now, those generations can also have access to water and energy and these resources as well. Now, sustainability is a balance of 3 things, very simple. So the first is nature, trees, the greenery. The second is money, jobs, the economy. And the third is people, that's us, me, you, that make up communities and society. So that's sustainability in a nutshell. But now, when we then broaden the term and we look at sustainability in terms of education, as my co-host explains to you, education. Now, when we look at it from the sustainable aspect of it, it's basically the advocacy of quality education and access to resources and learning materials for everyone. So, in essence, it's we want everyone in the world to basically have access to study from year one up until year 12. So this is what it means. So we're advocating for access to education, access to learning materials, access to resources, and the opportunity to go to school from year one up until year 12. And just in closing this section, I want us to understand that sustainability should be viewed as a strategic target. When you destroy education, you destroy futures and you erase a national identity, and it is a cripple to recovery.
Right. So, right now, I'll be talking about intersectionality in education and how those go together. So, when we look at intersectionality, it's all about social identities, how they work on multiple levels, resulting in unique experiences, opportunities, and barriers for each person. So, for instance, in society, boys and girls, men and women have their own unique experiences depending on the climate of the country or environment that they're in. So when we talk about intersectionality, we always look at, okay, you're a boy, you're a girl. How does society view you and treat you? And what does society give you, such as opportunities? Do you have a sense of equality? Is your dignity being kept? And are you being prioritized as a boy or girl? And as well as age adds into a factor. So when we look at intersectionality in education, we look at how, well, we analyze how boys and girls experience or receive education differently depending on their environment. So, for example, where boys are more prone to enter schools during times of war or even after war. We ask questions such as, what are the percentages of girls and boys returning to school? And if girls are permitted to go to school, at what age are they restricted or do they stop to attend school because of cultural reasons? So intersectionality as well as sustainability is so important because yes, everyone has a right to education, but we do need to put in regard that particularly in conservative and socially restrictive countries, there are going to be these small, minute reasons where girls cannot attend at a specific age because of a cultural factor. Or boys, if they do attend, they're given more opportunities than girls because they're seen as the head and more stronger and the ones who will take the society, the environment, and the country further. So understanding this assists us to understand the divide in society, particularly in countries where conflict is prevalent. It's at an all-time high, restraining society as a whole to grow, improve, develop, and provide security, as well as with intersectionality in education. And we bring sustainability, as my co-host said, is that when we look at the different aspects, the different experiences of boys, girls, men, and women, when we try to bring intersectionality into the question, into the chat, is that we want, just as much as boys are given the amount of equal opportunities, we want girls as well too. And it shouldn't just be for a certain period of time. It should be until the age of when they're 18, year 12,
Yeah.
and that it can last forever. And if they do have the liberty to decide if they want to go to university, that education still should happen and they should be given the opportunity to choose if they want to go or not. So sustainability is a huge topic, but it still goes in hand when we look at intersectionality as a whole.
Now, adding on to what Lindelwa explained, I'm going to take you through this section and now going back to war and how this is a battlefield. Now, as much as when there's war in a country, I want us to understand that this is an attack on futures. It's not just people being displaced. We are attacking a whole entire generation. An attack on schools, an attack on students, and education is essentially an attack on futures and generations. Now, the problem with this is you're living in a war-conflicted country. So imagine you are a child in one of a country and there's war. And today you're in class learning maths, English, etc., science, and tomorrow there's no classroom. Now, there's a balance, there's a gap in that because I mean, you look at that. So if there's no education, essentially, is there a future? What's next? Because now you're in school today and you're in school no more tomorrow. Now, that gap, what happens then? And the problem with this is that as the cycle goes on, we find ourselves in a society whereby now there's a missing gap. There's missing teachers, there's missing doctors, missing engineers, missing leaders, and this crippled recovery for that country, for that economy. And when there's war in a country again, it goes against the most basic rule. Do you know what the basic rule is, essentially?
The basic rule,
Yeah, of
what is
war.
it?
The basic rule is protecting children. And the ironic thing with that is that's where they get the most attack. So it basically counteracts the basic rules of war. No educational access, it means that you have destroyed an entire generation and you have basically gone against the rule of safeguarding schools and safeguarding our children, safeguarding their futures as well. And now the problem with this is, as she was mentioning, girls and boys, this doesn't impact just girls. It doesn't impact just boys. It impacts everyone because now we are left with children who are out of school. And now these children who are out of schools are prone to exploitation. Our girl children are now prone to forced childhood marriages, and the boy child is now prone to being forced to join these armed groups and have this future whereby their identity has now been tainted. And an important thing to also note with that is that school is a very, very, very critical step in breaking not only the poverty cycle or the generational curse, it's also an important step in breaking the cycle of crisis that is called war in a country and the economy.
Great.
And before we go into this case, I just want to add a FYI. There's what we call a Safe Schools Declaration Act. And this is something that was basically enacted in Norway, Oslo in 2015. And it is a political commitment to better protect students, teachers, universities, and schools during armed conflicts, because a lot of the time we find that people tend to use schools as shelters when there's war, and that disrupts again the learning system. And the whole point of this Safe Schools Declaration Act is to support the continuation of education and learning systems. So that's just a fact for you to know. And now my co-host and I are going to go into a few case studies on some countries. We're not saying that one country is better than the other or they have more problems. No, 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 no. This is just a few case studies just to give you an idea, and we will then be discussing this just to show you what war does in this country. And when you look at the stats, you will actually realize that it's deeper than just hearing this on the news or hearing this on social media. And we will take you through the Democratic Republic of Congo, the invasion of the M23. We will be looking at the Sudanese army and the rapid support forces. We will be looking at Taliban in Afghanistan and Russia's invasion in Ukraine.
So I will be talking about our first case study, the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this is a newly established crisis. Well, oh, let me just correct that. Not newly established. DRC has been going through a crisis for many years, since 1996, with
Yeah.
Rwanda, the Hutus, and the Tutsis. But as of now, we see that there's a greater, more divide and conflict, because now we see countries such as the M23, well, not countries, armed groups, rebel armed groups such as the M23 invading eastern Congo and taking territories such as in North Kivu and South Kivu. We see that how prior to the recent spike in the conflict, the education system in the region was already under immense pressure, notably because of the number of students and persons displaced caused by the past wars and now even more now. Several schools in the DRC have been bombarded, destroyed, and have been taken over by armed groups. And matter at these armed groups, they are not part of the state, but they are part of other states that are coming to take up resources and coming to take up land and just trying to invade and destroy the lives of people, as it's evident. It is revealed that the crisis in the eastern part of the country has led to a closure of over 2,000 schools, with 1,483 in like North Kivu and 1,111 in South Kivu, affecting over 1 million of children. Their right to an education, their right to receiving dignity, having more opportunities, has been stripped away because of the invasion of M23 demanding land from Eastern DRC.
Yeah, and to add on to that, as you mentioned, with over 1 million people that have been displaced, now the question that we actually need to ask ourselves is what happens to the children? What happens to their schooling career? What's next? And that's a gap that is uncertain, in other words.
Yeah, it is uncertain because, I mean, like since the beginning of the year, like over 500,000 children are like deprived of education. And this is like a stat that happened at the end of the year
Yeah.
in December. And according to UNICEF, a report by UNICEF, where some schools have been reopened, however, only about 50% of students have returned, with parents voicing their fears about, the security of their children and the current situation they're going in because they still feel a threat that their lives are still being compromised. And schools play a crucial role, in maintaining stability, providing a safe space that protects children from potential recruitment by armed groups and sexual violence. Schools can, offer children, a sense of dignity, and schools can provide a safe space for children who've experienced trauma and access to psychosocial support. And this goes hand in hand with my co-host, Deborah, where this is an attack on the futures of children.
Yeah.
Where children now, if when their education is being stripped away, being compromised, and where they're not given the ability to go receive an education, to learn, to grow as an individual, kids are more prone to enter armed groups. Forced to enter, well, I wouldn't say forced, some of them are literally manipulated to enter rebel groups to now fight in the wars with their innocent minds. Most girls are being kidnapped, where their bodies are being used as sexual symbols. Some of them become wives, some of them become cooks. Some children actually are being taught if they do not go to school, they enter rebel groups, and the rebel groups teach kids to actually become killers themselves. And the kids think this is okay because they've been conditioned that way, and they think this is their only way to survive in society, which we see a ripple effect of like psychological, social, and economic factors that can harm a country if education isn't given to children.
That is actually so sad now that you mention it, because as Lindy previously mentioned, that about 500,000 were displaced and about 50% of schools were reopened. So if we take that 500,000 and we look at half, we're looking at plus minus 250,000. Now we are the rest. Do you, in other words, want to say that, dreams are lost, gone, hope's gone for the other 250,000 plus minus? I mean, children that had dreams of being doctors, nurses, engineers, now that's gone. The hope of that is literally gone. And this should be a cry. This is literally a crisis. This is a crisis, and I don't think children should be deprived of that education. It plays a critical role. And as Lindelwa mentioned, once that cycle continues, it's a continuous cycle for decades to come. And in order for us to then reverse that, it takes a lot of work. And again, education is the key to a bright future. As Nelson Mandela once said, that education is the key that breaks poverty.
So true. Our second case is Sudan. Now, Sudan is in a unique case because Sudan has been in war for so many years prior to the 1980s because there were ethnic conflicts, there were conflicts with the people in power where they stole a lot of resources and even gave their own people away. But with Sudan right now, we have seen that over 80 years of war has not been, there's no peace building occurring. It's
Yeah.
just the exact same experience, exact same results as
Mm.
before. And even though international community has been told as to what is going on, not enough has been done. Not enough peace building talks have been
Yeah.
happening. Not enough aid has been given to the people in Sudan who are still stuck there or who are refugees in neighboring countries such as Somalia,
Yeah.
Chad, and Benin and Burundi. So in April 23, right? And like I said, this war has been going on for so long, but in April 2023, this is very potent because two leaders were clashing for power. Violent clashes erupted between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces, the RSF, as they're known in Sudan. So, according to an article written by Save Our Children, a number of violent attacks on schools and education in Sudan has increased fourfold since the start of the conflict. So, there's a deliberate attack on educational institutions because they know that majority of the time when there is a time of war and conflict, people go for safe pitch over there. So these incidents include airstrikes on schools, resulting in the killing and injury of students and teachers, torturing of teachers, killing and abduction of teachers, sexual violence against students inside education facilities. Other incidents included occupation of schools by armed groups, the use of schools as weapons storage facilities, and battles fought on educational premises. So, because of this war, it has left over 80 million children out of school over the past year. And this is a warning that the country is on the brink of the worst educational crisis in the world. And however, as of March 2025, there has been, slow progress in children returning to school, even though there is a lack. Um, Organizations such as Education Can't Wait and the Norwegian Refugee Council has contributed to renovating, buildings, repairing classrooms, installing secure gates, and construction like toilets and supplying schools.
Okay, so now if we go through and browse through Afghanistan as well, the education system again for the past 3 decades has been through conflict. We could literally compare this to Sudan as well.
Mm.
They are still facing a humanitarian crisis. It's still very much prominent with millions of people still being displaced. And this is even more prominent in rural areas where girls, despite recent progress in raising enrollment, I mean, attending just finishing primary school itself still
Mhm.
remains a distant dream. There's an estimated 3.7 million children that are out of school in Afghanistan, and unfortunately, 60% of them happen to be girl children.
I'm gonna just stop you there. When we actually see the statistics and we saw like with DRC and Sudan and Afghanistan, it's just it all goes in all together
Yeah.
where we see there's a social divide where girls are only given a specific, certain amount of opportunities to attend school. And then boys are just left. I mean, even in Afghanistan, there's actually a deliberate attack on the girls' freedom to education, where the Taliban has literally restricted from the sixth grade girls are not to attend further education.
Yeah.
And we see how intersectionality comes hand in hand in this because now we see there's a difference between how boys are treated in society and how girls are, where boys are given more opportunities, more freedom, but girls aren't in Afghanistan. When we see in terms of DRC and Sudan, those kids enter armed rebel groups and they're given different occupations on how to survive in society. The girls are wives, are cooks, their bodies are used as sexual, symbols. However, boys are they're seen as fighters. They should go and be ready to kill. They've been taught that. They've been taught that. So yeah.
Okay. The next case study is a very different one in this sense, and now we are looking at Ukraine. So, since the invasion happened in Ukraine, about over 4 million children in the country have been displaced, and their education has been disrupted. And this has affected over 600,000 school children. Now, this is latest data, and it comes directly from the UNICEF, whereby Ukrainian children are literally, as we speak today, they are literally 2 years behind in reading. They are a year behind in maths and half a year behind in science. Now, I know these stats look crazy, but now wait, it actually gets worse. Over 1 million Ukrainian refugee children are not even enrolled in their host country. So they fled to other countries for security and so forth. But the problem now remains is these children now stay at home. They haven't enrolled in schools in this country. And now again, it's a questionable gap because again, we ask ourselves, what is next? What happens next? And the question that we all have is what happens next? And I will give you a bit of data from the World Bank that sort of answers this question, and you can sort of have an idea what happens next. Now, according to the World Bank, 30 to 50% of children in conflict-affected countries face lower literacy rates. And as a result of these literacy rates, over decades, this translates into lower GDPs and a low economic socioeconomy of a country. So this translates into more than just empty classrooms. This is now missing people in society. This is now an educationless society. And again, it goes into having a country that has a lower GDP, a country that has a low economic rate. And that is the case of Ukraine. So I'm sure with the data from the World Bank and what UNICEF has said, you sort of link that together and you sort of have an answer to your question. And this does not just affect today, but decades to come. Now, this is a different section, and now this is the hidden cost of trauma and structural reform. Now, we sat here with Lindy and we spoke about all these different case studies and the impact and what it affects. Now, the problem that we haven't asked ourselves is the trauma. Now, say fine, for whatever reason, a child has the opportunity to get back into school and study, but the part that we haven't then looked at is the trauma that comes with being affected by war. And this is actually a study that has been proven by neuroscientists that when a child returns back to school after they have experienced war, there is still trauma that lingers. Imagine you are a child that today you're in class learning and tomorrow you're running away from guns and bombs or airstrikes. And now tomorrow you are in a classroom and you hear an overhead of a plane. What do you think that does to you? It's trauma, right? Now, in as much as there is reconstruction and rehabilitation of schools, but without trauma-informed education, children are literally still going back to a broken system. And a fact that I wanted you guys to understand is that when you are experiencing trauma, again, this is a proven study, it impairs learning of children. And now these children just jump back into this system. Educational reform should happen. And this is whereby we go beyond charity. This is now a call and a push for global policies to enforce the Safe Schools Declaration, to go back to that basic rule of protect our children, protect our children's education, and protect their futures. And the sad part in all of this that has been said is, did you actually know that less than 3% of global humanitarian aid goes to education? But to every negative, there is a positive. Now, the positive news is that, according to stats done, countries that actually put education at the forefront, in other words, prioritize education, have a 40% chance of actually not returning to war. An example of this I'll give you was not in the case study, but is Rwanda. Rwanda actually integrated reconciliation and peace building into their curriculum, and as a result, we see modern day Rwanda that is actually a thriving economy, a thriving community as well. So that's a very good example of integrating peace building into education and so forth. And again, UNICEF also plays a very pivotal role in this. UNICEF is at the forefront of endorsing the Safe Schools Declaration Act. UNICEF also stays at the forefront of promoting informal learning in cases whereby formal learning cannot take place. They endorse informal learning, for example, and this is also great news, and teachers as well that are at the forefront of this.
So, an important question to ask is, even though there has been movement to ensure and provide education to children in war-dominant countries, such as the provision of school supplies, renovating buildings, and providing a secure learning environment, which is important, are the children receiving their right to quality? The key word is quality education. And that is a question for you all to answer in your own time.
And we humbly thank you for joining our session. We hope that this was impactful and shed a bit of light on what's going on in some of these countries, and also the amazing teachers in refugee camps that are promoting informal learning as well, are doing amazing jobs. So thank you so much.